Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the date for Flag Day was chosen to be June 14th, 1777, because that was when the Second Continental Congress approved the design of the first American flag. Learn how today's flag proudly displays 50 stars for the 50 states, while still keeping the original 13 stripes to remember America's colonies. Discover that in June 1776, 3 members of the Congressional Committee, George Washington, Robert Morris, and George Ross, called on Betsy Ross at her Philadelphia, Pennsylvania sewing shop to sew the first American flag.
Imagine, facing federal prison time just because you failed to properly illuminate a piece of fabric displayed in your front yard.
Right. Or because you accidentally let it touch the ground.
Yeah. It sounds completely absurd. I mean, almost like the draconian rules you would expect in some medieval kingdom guarding a religious relic.
It really does. But, those guidelines actually exist right here.
They do. And they govern the ultimate symbol of the United States. So today, we are taking a custom-tailored deep dive into the American flag.
And because you are listening to this on June 14th, which is Flag Day, there is really no better moment to strip away all that basic grade school trivia.
Exactly. Our mission today is to look at the actual mechanisms of how this symbol operates. We are going to uncover the surprising origins, the unsung heroes, and the really strict rules surrounding the Stars and Stripes.
It is a remarkable piece of sociological engineering. We are looking at a progression that starts with a logistical military nightmare in the 1700s and ends with a modern constitutional paradox. The journey of the flag forces us to examine the tension between federal mandates and grassroots civilian ownership. It's definitely not a static object.
Not at all.
It's this highly active, constantly evolving interface between the government and the public.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the sheer weight of the flag today, we have to look at the absolute chaos of its origin.
Oh, total chaos.
Yeah. During the early days of the American Revolution, the Continental Army was less of an army and, honestly, more of a highly disorganized, heavily armed neighborhood watch.
That is a very good way to put it.
Right. You had these local militias showing up to major battles flying their own regional flags. One group has a pine tree, another has a rattlesnake, someone else has a crescent moon.
And that lack of visual cohesion is not just like a branding problem, it is a deadly tactical failure.
It's like an amateur sports team showing up to a championship game, and every single player is wearing a completely different uniform. How do you even know who's on your side?
You don't. And when you are on an 18th century battlefield, communication relies almost entirely on line of sight.
Right, because of the weapons.
Exactly. Black powder muskets and cannons create incredibly thick, blinding smoke. In the heat of combat, a commander needs to look across this chaotic, smoke-filled valley and instantly calculate troop movements.
Wow.
So if every regiment is flying a different colored banner, command and control completely breaks down. Friendly fire becomes a massive, massive risk.
It's literally a friend or foe identification system.
Yeah.
Without a unified visual signal, you quite literally don't know who to shoot.
That was the desperate reality that forced the Second Continental Congress to act. In 1775, they established the Continental Army to basically consolidate these fractured militias into a single fighting force.
But an army needs a standard.
Right. So 2 years later, on June 14, 1777, Congress passed the first flag resolution. They mandated 13 alternating red and white stripes and 13 white stars in a blue field.
And the language they use in that resolution is fascinating to me.
How so?
Well, they didn't just call it a design. They specifically noted that the stars represented a new constellation.
Yeah.
If you think about the geopolitical landscape of the 1700s, that is a massive ideological flex.
It really is. I mean, European flags were totally dominated by heraldry. Lions, eagles, crowns, these massive crosses.
Exactly. Symbols of top-down inherited hierarchy. A constellation, by contrast, is a group of entirely distinct individual stars that only create a shape because they are arranged together in the same sky.
The philosophical shift there is profound. They were telling the world that this wasn't just a new nation, it was an entirely new organizing principle for human governance.
Yeah.
The individual states, like the stars, retain their distinct borders, but they move together. And that 1777 resolution connects directly to today. We still have those 13 stripes for the original colonies, right alongside the 50 stars for the 50 states.
But, declaring a new philosophical constellation in a congressional hall is the easy part. Someone actually had to figure out how to manufacture these things at scale.
Yes, they did.
Which brings us to Betsy Ross. Now, I have to admit, I always pictured Betsy Ross as this gentle, elderly woman sitting in a quiet parlor, delicately cross-stitching a flag while sipping tea.
That is a classic image, yeah.
But looking at the historical record, that mythology completely undersells who she actually was.
Oh, entirely. The parlor myth is pervasive, but the reality is far more impressive. In late May 1776, George Washington, Robert Morris, and George Ross didn't just walk into her Philadelphia shop by random chance.
Right, like they didn't just pick her out of a colonial phone book.
Exactly. Betsy Ross was operating a highly demanding manufacturing business in a wartime economy. According to her daughter, she was already well acquainted with Washington. She had embroidered ruffles for his shirt bosoms and cuffs.
Which establishes a personal connection.
Right, that personal trust was partly why she was chosen. But she was also highly skilled. She wove cloth and even sewed canvas gunpowder pouches for the soldiers.
Wait, really? She was a defense contractor?
She absolutely was.
I was reading about her shock's output, and she wasn't just making decorative linens. She was manufacturing heavy-duty military supplies. That changes the entire context for me.
Well, think about the physical environment a battlefield flag has to endure.
Oh, sure.
It is subjected to gale force winds, pouring rain, sea salt if it's on a naval vessel, and, flying shrapnel. A delicate parlor seamstress could not construct a flag capable of surviving those conditions.
Right, the seams have to be reinforced.
Yes, and the dye has to resist fading in the harsh sun, so the colors remain visible through all that battlefield smoke we discussed earlier. Washington needed an artisan who understood industrial strength fabrication. She finished the first one in June 1776.
It makes complete sense. She was uniquely qualified to build a piece of tactical military equipment. And here's where it gets really interesting, this theme of civilian ingenuity. It doesn't stop in the 18th century.
Well, it doesn't.
Let's fast forward to the 1950s. The country's expanding, Alaska and Hawaii are on the verge of statehood, and the 48-star flag is obsolete.
Right. The federal government is trying to figure out how to update the design.
But it wasn't a team of government engineers who solved the problem. It was a 17-year-old high school student from Ohio named Bob Heft.
The Bob Heft story is amazing. It perfectly illustrates how our flag is treated almost like open source software by the American public. In 1958, Heft took it upon himself to update the flag for a history project.
And his teacher gave him a B-. I literally cannot get over that detail.
Yeah, the teacher was not impressed.
The teacher looked at the project, criticized it for lacking creativity, and essentially told him, if you can get the United States Congress to accept this, I'll change your grade.
Which is a remarkably dismissive challenge to give a teenager.
Seriously.
But Heft's design was actually a brilliant solution to a really complex spatial geometry problem.
Right, because you have a fixed rectangular blue field.
Well,
the canton.
Exactly. You need to fit 50 stars into that exact same space without making the stars significantly smaller or making the field look disorganized and cluttered.
It's essentially a UX/UI design problem. If the visual interface is too crowded, it loses its impact.
So true. And Heft figured out that by staggering the rows, alternating rows of 6 stars and 5 stars, he could achieve perfect symmetry.
He literally took his family's 48-star flag, disassembled it, and meticulously stitched 50 stars in that symmetrical pattern using his mother's sewing machine.
And then he sent the flag to his congressman, who presented it to President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. And out of thousands of submitted designs, many from professional vexillologists and artists, Eisenhower chose the teenager's geometric solution.
He literally patched the visual code of the nation. The government adopted the patch. And yes, his teacher formally changed his grade to an A.
Which might be the ultimate academic flex in American history.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But, that open source mentality, this idea that the public leads and the government eventually catches up, is the exact same mechanism that gave us Flag Day itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you would assume the Founding Fathers codified June 14th into law the moment the ink dried on the 1777 resolution. But they didn't.
No, they didn't. The federal government completely ignored the anniversary for over a century.
A century?
Yeah. The first formal observance of Flag Day didn't happen until 1885. And it was entirely a grassroots effort spearheaded by Bernard Sigrand, a 19-year-old school teacher in a small town in Wisconsin.
Just a small-town teacher.
Right. He simply decided his students needed to understand the gravity of the symbol, so he put a flag on his desk and led them in an observance.
He didn't ask for permission. He just, created the holiday.
Exactly. And from that classroom, it slowly gained momentum.
Yeah.
But look at the timeline here. Sigrand starts this in 1885. It takes until 1916 for President Woodrow Wilson to issue a proclamation officially establishing June 14 as Flag Day.
And a proclamation isn't even a permanent law.
Right. It took until August 3, 1949, for Congress to actually establish National Flag Day legally, and the first official Flag Day was held that same year.
So wait, that is a 64-year gap between a citizen deciding the flag needed a dedicated day of reverence and the federal government finally codifying it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you are seeing in that 60-plus year span is a massive cultural shift.
How so?
Well, during the early years of the Republic, the flag was primarily seen as a military and governmental asset. It flew over forts and post offices. It wasn't really something average citizens displayed on their front porches.
Ah, okay.
The Civil War began to shift that as the flag became a symbol of national preservation. By the time Sigrand started his campaign, the public had adopted the flag as a deeply personal symbol of civic identity.
And because it became so deeply entrenched in the nation's identity, the expectations for how citizens interact with it became incredibly rigid.
Yes, very rigid.
Which brings us to the U.S. Flag Code. Congress issued it on December 22, 1942. When you read through it, it feels less like a set of civic suggestions and more like the care instructions for a priceless museum artifact.
The Flag Code is comprehensive. For instance, during parades or when the flag is being hoisted or lowered, military members and veterans salute, while civilians are required to place their right hand over their hearts.
Right.
It also dictates that flags should be illuminated by sunlight during the day and by a dedicated light source if displayed at night.
And it is strictly prohibited to draw or mark on the flag.
Mm-hmm.
You can't use it as outdoor decor. It really makes you think, do you display the flag? What are your feelings when you see it treated this way?
It definitely demands a high level of respect. And then, of course, there's the folding ceremony. The military doesn't just roll the flag up and stuff it in a closet.
No, not at all.
There is a meticulously choreographed 13-fold process that condenses this massive rectangular cloth into a crisp, tight, three-cornered shape.
And the mechanics of that fold are highly intentional.
Right, extremely intentional. When the folding is complete, only the blue field and the white stars are visible. The red and white stripes are entirely tucked away inside. It is designed to resemble the three-cornered hats worn by the soldiers under George Washington's command. Every physical action taken with the flag is designed to reinforce its historical weight.
Which brings us to the most fascinating friction point in this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
Because the flag is treated with such intense reverence, lawmakers inevitably tried to criminalize disrespect.
Yes, they did.
In 1968, Congress passed the Flag Protection Act, explicitly making it illegal to burn or deface the flag.
That law was an attempt to mandate reverence, but it ran headfirst into the ultimate legal paradox of the American system.
Oh, the Supreme Court reversal.
Right. 20 years later, in 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court overruled this law. The court decided the government couldn't curb an individual's First Amendment rights by prohibiting the desecration of the U.S. flag.
I really want to dig into the logic here, because at first glance, burning a piece of fabric doesn't look like speech. It looks like an action.
That's true.
How did the Supreme Court justify classifying a destructive physical act as protected free speech?
The legal concept at the heart of the ruling is expressive conduct. The court recognized that speech isn't just spoken words or written text. It includes actions intended to convey a specific, understandable message.
Okay, I follow.
The irony, and really the core of the court's logic, is that the flag is such a universally recognized symbol of the American government that burning it is an instantly readable form of political protest.
So, because the government and the public spent 2 centuries injecting the flag with so much profound meaning, they inadvertently made it the most effective tool for protesting the government itself.
That is the exact paradox.
Yeah.
If the flag meant nothing, burning it wouldn't communicate anything, and it wouldn't be effective speech.
Right.
The court essentially ruled that the government cannot designate a symbol to be so important that it is immune from being used to criticize the government.
It's a staggering piece of legal reality. The flag protects the person burning it. It's heavy. And it forces you to realize that this isn't just a colorful piece of cloth. It is the physical embodiment of a deeply complex legal philosophy. But the flag doesn't just operate in courtrooms and on flagpoles. It has also inspired the auditory traditions that open nearly every major American event.
You're talking about the Star-Spangled Banner.
Yeah. I mean, the connection to the War of 1812 at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, the events there directly inspired Francis Scott Key to write those famous words.
The connection between the visual symbol and the auditory tradition there is quite literal. Key was detained on a ship in Baltimore Harbor, watching the British Navy unleash a relentless, massive artillery bombardment on Fort McHenry.
And the fort was flying this enormous garrison flag, right?
Yes, specifically commissioned to be large enough that the British would have no difficulty seeing it from a distance. Key watched the bombardment through the night. The explosive flashes of the rockets and the bombs were literally the only illumination he had to see if the fort had surrendered.
And when the smoke cleared at dawn, that massive industrial-grade textile, which was engineered to withstand extreme weather and shrapnel, much like the ones Betsy Ross built, was still physically attached to the pole.
Exactly. Key wasn't just writing a poetic metaphor. His lyrics were a literal, real-time damage report. The Star-Spangled Banner was a confirmation of survival based entirely on the visual endurance of the flag.
And that auditory tradition totally endures today. That anthem is performed at the beginning of special events nationwide. Local American Legion posts hold annual Flag Day ceremonies.
Yes, they publicly recite the Pledge of Allegiance and honor the evolution of those 50 stars. The tactile, visual, and auditory experiences of the flag are completely intertwined.
So what does this all mean? The source materials actually suggest a really tangible way to process all of this. They recommend maybe trying to practice proper flag folding at home.
It's a great exercise.
Even if you have to use a blanket to practice. When you actually put your hands on the fabric and try to replicate that geometry, you realize how much physical care is demanded by the tradition.
It forces you to engage with the mechanics of the symbol, not just its image. You begin to understand the tactile reality of what Bob Heft was working with when he cut apart his family flag, or what the soldiers at Fort McHenry had to hoist into the wind.
We have tracked an incredible evolution today. We started in the fragmented, friendly fire chaos of the Revolutionary War, where a unified new constellation was born out of pure necessity.
We stripped away the parlor myth of Betsy Ross to reveal a hard-working seamstress making Washington shirt ruffles and building military-grade textiles.
We watched a 17-year-old high school student design a 50-star geometric puzzle that became the national standard. We followed a 60-year grassroots campaign led by a school teacher to force the government to recognize Flag Day.
And we waded into the deep constitutional waters of the Supreme Court, exploring how the ultimate symbol of freedom is legally bound to protect its own destruction.
It is a continuous, living dialogue between the fabric and the public.
It absolutely is. Consider how a piece of cloth, originally created out of pure, practical battlefield necessity so soldiers wouldn't shoot their own allies, evolved into a living symbol so powerful that its physical treatment is legislated by Congress, debated by the Supreme Court, and ceremoniously guarded by soldiers.
Seriously. The next time you see the flag illuminated at night, think about all the hands, from seamstresses to students, that shape the constellation you're looking at.
Well said.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over that pushes beyond the physical history we've discussed.
Oh, I like where this is going.
For over 2 centuries, the entire identity of the flag has been tied to its physical existence. You know, the stitching, the canvas, the way it catches the wind. But today, the vast majority of the flags we interact with aren't made of thread at all.
Right, they are made of pixels.
Exactly. They are emojis on a keyboard, digital banners on a social media profile, or graphics in a video game. If the massive legal and cultural weight of the flag was entirely forged by how we handle the physical object, what happens to that reverence in a purely digital space?
That is a fascinating question.
How do you apply the strict artifact-level care of the U.S. flag code to an image that could be duplicated, deleted, or distorted with a single keystroke? It is definitely worth asking if a digital constellation carries the same constitutional gravity as the one stitched together by the defense contractors and high school students of the past. Thank you for joining in on this deep dive. Keep questioning the symbols around you, stay insanely curious, and we will catch you next time.
Hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.